Hello, my name's William Aderholdt, and I'm on the Grand Farm team as the Grand Farm Program Manager. In that role, I really look at how do we get to the future of farming through project iteration, bringing people together around these great ideas, and identifying the pain points that exist that we can really center this work around. We'll talk about all that during this presentation. We're excited to introduce the Grand Farm to you and figure out ways that through this we can begin to collaborate and work towards some meaningful projects together. The Grand Farm really started with this idea of creating something that was so grand, this grand challenge, that it would be very hard to accomplish, but it was very inspired by this idea of the JFK moonshot. So this concept of going to the moon in 10 years because it was hard and it was challenging and it seemed impossible at the time, but understanding that through collaboration, through meaningful work of everyone involved, we could get to a place that made sense, and we could get to an achievable outcome and a success story that we're all proud of. So how did this get started? In March 2017, Barry Batchelor stood up at 1 Million Cups, a program bringing entrepreneurs together led by Emerging Prairie, and asked our community, what is our major? And what he meant by that was, what is our ability to contribute to the world? What are the things that we excel at? And through many conversations with stakeholders over the next year, it came to this idea of agriculture technology. It made so much sense. This idea that we have a rich history in North Dakota in agriculture. We have research universities in the area that are well known for the work that they're doing, and agriculture technology companies who are leading the way in terms of how we get to the next generation of agriculture technology. Upon letting people know about this concept, Kevin and Stacy Bifford actually donated this land the next day, allowing the Grand Farm to use this to achieve the goals that they were setting out to do so. In July of 2018, Brad Smith and Barry Batchelor stood up on stage at TEDx Fargo. Brad Smith talked about this idea of the rural digital divide, how there was a gap in opportunities just based on how much connectivity was in your community. And this really paved the way for the conversations that would later occur and continue to occur in the idea that we need good connectivity, not just for precision agriculture and the work that we're going to be doing in agriculture technology, but also to make sure that our rural communities can be prosperous, to allow remote work to happen and education systems and healthcare systems to work remotely. Barry Batchelor stood up on stage and talked about the Robo-Cinchon Valley, this idea that the Red River Valley could become the global centerpiece of agriculture technology, a place where we could bring together technology innovators, thought leaders, researchers, and really come up with the concepts that would make sense for the future of agriculture and lead and pave the way in that area. The Grand Farm knew that it needed to look at the future of farming and the geographical farm of the future and how each region had its own traditions and cultures in terms of growing their food and producing food for the world. It is for this reason that we start in North America, where we have a research base already established, community already established, and know that a lot of these technologies are centered around row crops. Once it's figured out how to move into next generation technology with this integration of systems, of digitization of agriculture and autonomous systems, then we can adapt those technologies for a global setting by 2030. SpaceX, NASA, Blue Origin have all discussed the need for low and zero gravity farming in trips to the moon and Mars. Supply chains won't allow for us to send food to astronauts who would make those missions. So we need to begin thinking about how do you grow food in those spaces through SpaceAg concepts. So we are looking at that by our milestone by 2035. But we also knew we needed to start with challenges, To really think about how we were going to achieve those milestones, we wanted to start with challenges that exist today, recognizing that so many things had been pitched to people over the last 10, 20 years based on just adapting from other industries. A lot of those solutions don't make sense if they didn't start with a challenge. So we design the Grand Farm around challenges and establishing that strategy. The first of those is feeding a growing population. We know the world is expected to increase to 10 billion people by 2050. That's a 30% increase in the population in just 30 growing seasons. That's going to increase strain on our producers, but also on our land. So we need to think about how we do so sustainably. How do we feed these people sustainably? And I believe agriculture technology has a great role to play in that. We know there's an agriculture labor shortage, aging workforce in agriculture, increased barriers to entry. It's very difficult to start a farm. There's a lot of costs behind it, a lot of debt you have to take on. And a lot of our rural communities have faced out-migration over the last 50 to 100 years, which have changed the landscape in which these communities operate. Agriculture technology can help solve this, and we're excited to talk about how as we begin to innovate towards this. Lack of venture capital. When we looked at starting an ag tech centric project, we also knew venture capital would be very relevant to the conversation. In a review of the 50 states in the United States, it was found that North Dakota was the only state without world-class venture capital companies investing in technology. That was a major issue in terms of how we could bring together a technology-centered project like this. A workforce skills gap. To think about these technologies, we also need to think about the technologists who produce them. A lot of these technologists will be needed to help fill these open jobs. Microsoft just released a report that there will be 150 million open jobs in software unfilled in just the next 5 years by 2025. We need to think about globally, how do we begin to fill those jobs so we can begin moving towards technology innovations. Finally, agriculture safety. We know agriculture is a dangerous job. We've all heard stories of family members, of neighbors who have been hurt, maimed, or killed by this equipment, or just doing their job. Agriculture is a top 10 most dangerous job in the United States, and it is the most dangerous job in other places within the world. So Grand Farm set on 5 different strategic pillars to accomplish these challenges and actually move towards meaningful solutions. The first was to establish a global ecosystem. The second was to bring venture capital and develop an innovation platform. The third was to establish a place where people could come together and prototype autonomous technologies and technologies in agriculture, and really to serve as a place to think about these great opportunities. Fourth was upskilling the workforce. As I mentioned, agriculture labor, but also technologists are lacking right now in agriculture technology fields and agriculture industry. And we need to begin thinking about how we upskill the workforce. And finally, policy. How we actually achieve the goals we're setting out to achieve in a meaningful way with lawmakers by bringing stakeholders, by bringing thought leaders into the mix to provide insights on the work that they're doing. So to talk about each of these very quickly in terms of what was accomplished over the last year. Since we began, we've learned that there are about 8 other Grand Farm equivalents, people working on similar concepts to the Grand Farm throughout the world. None of those are in the United States, and all of them are only supported by their government. So you cannot get involved with them. They were invested between $50 and $100 million into by their own governments. We've established contact with them and have regular meetings with those organizations to talk about how we can meaningfully collaborate. We've also created a global network of startups, of industry partners, researchers, and higher education organizations and the governments that are involved in this work. The innovation platform. Microsoft, Bremer Bank, CHS, and OCP Group work together with Grand Farm to recruit Plug and Play to Fargo, North Dakota. Plug and Play is bringing 28 startups to North Dakota per year. from around the globe, and then investing with venture capital into these. This brought venture capital into the mix, which was definitely necessary for the work that we're doing. The Grand Farm test site. We knew we had the land. We didn't know what exactly we wanted to do with this. So what we were able to accomplish once we had the land were 40 projects in 2020 with 9 partner organizations. We were also able to bring together 22 events in a safe social distance way, which had 750 attendees. Each of these events brought meaningful contributions to the conversation, and were well respected by the people there in terms of being able to actually connect in a meaningful way with their peers. We also launched Emerging Digital Academy back in April of 2020. The first cohort had 13 students. They went through a 20-week intensive but virtual course where they could participate from anywhere within North Dakota or the country. And those students graduated, and within 4 weeks were able to find jobs. 12 out of 13 students have found jobs now, or have continued their education. The average starting salary of these students was $24,000. Today, they're making more than $50,000 on average. And that, for us, was a huge win in terms of being able to improve the lives of these learners, but also contribute to that workforce gap we discussed. And then finally, policy. Back in November, we brought FCC Chairman Ajit Pai to North Dakota to talk about rural broadband and rural prosperity, the need for rural connectivity based on the call to action by Brad Smith at TEDx Fargo. This was the end of Chairman Pai's tour of rural communities and thinking about how the FCC can contribute towards a solution. This led to a $20 billion allocation in towards rural connectivity, as well as a $1 billion allocation just towards precision agriculture innovations, which we believe will help drive rural prosperity as we move forward. For us at the Grand Farm, if you'd like to get engaged, we'd ask that you go to grandfarm.com and you go to the Connect with Us part of the page and just fill out the information, and we'll reach out to you in the next week. So grandfarm.com, and we look forward to connecting with you in the near future.